Hey everyone, Kevin here with Victory 4x4. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to install our strike front bumper on a 200 series Land Cruiser and Lexus LX 570. Now the bumper install is going to be pretty much the same for your LX 570. However, the way we lay out and mark this cut is going to be just a little bit different. So we'll show you that when we get to that point. Now before we get started, you guys are going to notice we've already got some blue tape on here. That's for laying out our cut, which we'll show you later on. The first step in this disassembly, I'm going to come up here under the hood and get this plastic cover panel removed. That's just held in place with 7 of these black plastic clips. Those you simply push in on the center and then the clip will lift right out of the hole, allowing you to remove that. Out of the way, we'll come up here and remove 3 10mm bolt heads from the top of this grill. Then you can come out here to the front and remove these trim sections, one on each side. For this, I'm just going to use a plastic panel tool to get started behind here and help me pry out. You can sometimes get a hold of these just using your fingers. And that's just held in place with plastic clips. Then down in here behind the grill, you're going to have 3 of these black plastic clips to remove. For this, you can either use a panel tool like I have here or a flat blade screwdriver. You can simply pull up on the center and then get underneath that whole assembly and pull it out of the hole. Next, up here on the back of the grill, you're going to have 2 wire harness clips to remove. These are just going to have thumb tabs that need to be pushed in, and then the clips can be pulled back off of their connector. Then over here on the driver's side of the vehicle, you'll have another wire harness connection that needs to be removed. For this, you're going to have 2 small tabs here that can be pushed in, releasing that white lever. After that, you'll push up on the lever and then pull out on this harness connection. Then you'll want to disconnect this headlight sprayer hose. Now before you do this, just know that this is going to release all your washer fluid from the tank. So what I'm going to recommend is grabbing a pair of vice grips and then lightly pinching off this line. Don't go so much that you'll damage the hose, but enough that it's not going to leak fluid once removed. And then you can push down on this thumb tab and pull back on the hose to separate both of those. Then moving into the wheel openings, which this will be the same on both driver and passenger side, you're going to have 3 Torx head screws here that can be removed with a T30. And then down here, you've got 2 10mm bolt heads that need to come out as well. Then, moving underneath the front of the vehicle, we're going to need to remove this skid plate, these plastic splash guards, as well as the tow hooks and several fasteners holding this fascia to the front of the truck. So I'm going to start out here with these splash guards. Those are going to be 4 screws that can be removed with a 10mm socket, and then this one up here is a plastic nut that you'll need a 12mm for. With those out of the way, we can remove this main skid. To get this off, you're going to need to remove the 3 recessed screws in these holes, the 3 in these holes, as well as 2 out here on the back corners, and these 2 in the center that hold it to this center skid plate. Then to get this remaining center skid down, you'll just remove the back 2 bolts here using the same socket. Next, you can drop both of these tow hooks out of the way using your 17mm socket. Then you should have just 6 more fasteners holding the bottom of this fascia to the front of the vehicle. Those can all be removed with a 10mm. Then you can just make sure that the fascia is free from all those clip style nuts in the wheel openings. And then it's just a matter of starting at each end and pulling this free from the plastic retainers. Do that on each side, and then this entire fascia assembly should drop off the front of the vehicle. With that out of the way, grab the foam on the front of this crash bar, pull it free, and toss it to the side. Then grab your 17 again and remove the 3 nuts on each side that hold this to the front of the truck. Then this can be pulled off the mounts and discarded as well. Next, you can grab a 14 and remove these mounts from the front of the vehicle, just taking off the 4 nuts holding those in place. Now while we have this off, you're going to want to come in the back of here and remove this wire harness as well as the washer sprayer hoses from the back of the fascia, because you're going to be making your cut in about this area. You don't want to damage these, but also you're going to need that bottom section to be able to drop free. So to do that, out on each end, you're going to have 2 plugs. These are just, again, a little thumb tab. Press the tab, pull back and remove the connector. And then these sensors can simply be pushed back out of the front of the fascia. Now once you have those disconnected, you can do one of 2 things. You can get in here with a panel tool and individually remove all of these clips. However, you're not going to be reusing these to attach it into our bumper. So I'm just going to run through real quick with some side cuts, cut all these zip ties, and then pull this free. Now once you have that all freed up, you can set this main harness to the side. Just note where that connector is so that you orient it to the correct side when you're reinstalling that into the bumper. Then as for the sprayer hose, you can do one of 2 things. You can either kind of tie it up here out of the way during the cut as well as after for the bumper install, or since we already have it disconnected from the vehicle, you can temporarily disconnect it from the back side of the sprayers and set this aside as well. Now that we have all that out of the way, we're going to grab our fascia again, as well as the grill, slap that back up here on the front of the vehicle so that we can mark and make our cut. Now you're just going to snap that back in with all the factory clips, and if you're concerned about it, just to be safe, you can throw a couple screws back in the top. Okay, so now that we have this back up here on the vehicle, we're ready to measure and lay out our cut lines. So you can see we kind of already got started here. I'm going to walk you through how we did that, and then we're going to continue on from there. Now for the first mark here, you're going to obviously want to put down a few inch long piece of masking tape, and then you're going to measure from this very point where the fascia meets the fender and kind of runs out into this wheel opening. You'll be measuring from there down 2 inches, and then you can make your first mark here. For the next one, you're going to need to put a small piece of tape up here on the bottom edge of the headlight, roughly in this area, and then you'll measure out from the very point of the headlight here out to 13 inches. Make a mark like you can see we've done there, and then using that as a locator, you can measure down from the front edge of the headlight. Again, put down another piece of tape to mark with, and then make a mark here horizontal at 6 5/8. Then for the third measurement, you can come up here to the very point of this light and measure down across the front of the bumper and make another mark here at 6 inches. Now you guys may be noticing that I'm using this flexible tape That's what we're gonna recommend you have and use to lay this out, since we're measuring across multiple contours here. That's gonna be the easiest thing to use. If you don't have one of these and you're gonna be trying to use a traditional style tape measure, just note that it's gonna be a little bit less accurate and you may have to do some more finish fitment work down here, so leave yourself a little bit extra material for that. Now the next step in this is gonna be to connect all these marks. One thing you can kind of reference here as we're doing that is this body line, kind of the top edge of it, because there's multiple levels right here to this contour. You can reference that as you connect these two, just noting that this line should run pretty much parallel to that. Now when connecting these lines, we're going to recommend you have a laser level, kind of like we're using here. Now just to note, this is not actually level, it's set, it's kind of locked in place and then adjusted to set on my 2 points here so that I can connect those with a nice straight line. This can be done without one of these. It's just going to be a lot easier to get around these radiuses using something like this. Now another thing we're going to recommend is going to be something like this 3M fine line tape. It's going to be a little bit narrower and it's going to kind of conform to all of these a little bit better. However, again, it can be done with something like this 1-inch tape you see here. Once you have all this marked out and you have your line set in line with your marks, it's simply a matter of tracing that out using the tape. Kind of using extra care to make sure you're nice and straight here. You can see I'm just kind of setting this tape right on the top edge of that laser mark. Then again, once I'm happy with the look of that, I'm just going to connect one mark to the next. Now that I'm happy with that, I can go over and do the same thing on the other side. Then once I finish there, I can move my laser one more time and connect these two innermost points across the front underneath the grill. Now once I've got the main line taped out, I also went back and trimmed off any tape that hung down below that, because this is going to be our cut side and I don't want any of that confusing me along the way. And then we're also going to recommend getting yourself some wider tape like I have here, just using this all the way along the front of this, kind of like that, to just tape off everything above your line so that you protect it during that cut. Then once we have that done, you can grab your cutting tool of choice, which I'm going to be using this grinder with a 4.5-inch cutting disc. That's kind of what we recommend. However, some of you guys might opt for like an air saw or whatever you have at your disposal. Just note, if you're going to use something like that with a blade, make sure it's not going too far back behind here. Again, you've already had this off, so you kind of know what's back there to worry about as well. One more quick tip before I begin cutting, something you can do because you're going to have a pretty big section of this that you're cutting free, is if you want, you can leave a real small portion out here on each corner, as well as maybe 1 or 2 across the center underneath the grill to kind of help support that, and then go back and just knock those off right at the very end to free that up. Aside from that, you're just using your cutting tool to follow along the tape line you just made to remove this. Then after you got that cut free, obviously you can see I've kind of got some little pieces hanging off the bottom of here. So you're just going to go back with some sort of sanding disc or pad and clean that up. I'm just going to be using a sanding flat disc on that same grinder. Now after you get this cleaned up, you're ready to test fit your bumper and see if there's any minor adjustments that need to be made. Now the next step is going to be to actually lay out the cut on the vehicle before we actually make that cut. You can already kind of see here, we've got our passenger side laid out on this one, and I want to walk you through how we did it. So you're going to need to make 3 marks on each side of the vehicle so that you have a location to make these marks. As I tell you kind of where these are at, we're going to place 1 piece of tape kind of in the rough location, and that'll give you something to write on as you measure these out. Now for the first one, we're going to start right back here in the wheel opening at this farthest back point on the front fascia, and we're just going to measure down along this face 4 1/4 inches from that back point and make a mark right here, as you can see we've already done. Your next one will be from this point here where the fascia kind of peaks and intersects with the fender and the headlight. Now the reason I'm using a flexible tape measure here is there's quite a bit of contour to this, so if you have one of these available, it's going to be your best option. If not, you're just going to have to kind of pull your tape measure as tight as possible to that and get as close as you can, but this is going to give you the best result. So again, coming from this peak, I'm going to let this kind of fall straight down, and then you're going to make a mark right here at 7 3/4. Now for the third mark, again, you're going to have just this 1 piece of vertical tape as a place to make your mark. You're going to need to come in here just below the headlight, right where this begins to radius up. You'll need to hook kind of the corner of your tape right on that last flat edge before the radius, and then you'll measure down 5 1/2 inches straight down and make a mark toward the inside of your tape. So after you've got all 3 of those marks made, the next thing you're going to need to do is basically connect the dots between those using a piece of tape for a straight cut line. So what we're going to recommend for that is something similar to this laser level that we have here. This is going to be the easiest way to kind of identify those visually, as well as trace it out basically with your tape as you lay that across the fascia. One thing that I think is kind of important here that we want to mention, this isn't necessarily a level line. This is just a straight line between these marks. So I've locked this, and then I'm just going to adjust it accordingly to kind of tilt that line as I need to line up my points. And then I can make some minor height adjustments here as well, so I can get a nice straight line to connect these two. Now you can see, again, I've already laid out this tape as you guys are going to need to do here. So then you'll need to connect these 2 points. Again, this is a great spot for this laser level to come in handy. It kind of works great to make a nice straight line around this radius out here on the corner. So then you'll just trace along that line with your tape as we've done here, and then just follow that, bringing it straight all the way over around this edge of the grill. Now once you have that laid out, one good way that you can check that you got this point marked in the correct location is to measure up from this very bottom edge of the grill and make sure that you've got about 1 inch from there to the bottom edge of your tape. After that, I can jump over here, lay out those same 3 marks using the same points to measure from, and then we can connect our 2 center points, again using a nice straight laser line. So after that, you've got this all laid out, you're happy with your marks, you got a nice straight line you're going to cut on. Just grab yourself a 4 1/2 inch grinder like this with a cutting disc, and you're just going to start at one end, work your way all the way around. Again, we already removed the wiring and the hoses and stuff behind there, but just take a second look, make sure when you go to make your cuts that there's not anything down in here that you're going to run into. There shouldn't be, but just use caution there so you're not cutting too deep. So after that, it's just a matter of pulling off this tape, doing any last minute cleanup to any things you may see once that's removed, and then you're ready to test fit your bumper. After that, you can make any minor adjustments to this cut that you may need to before final installation. Now, one of the last things you're going to need to do to prep the vehicle for this bumper install is modify these air dams. There's kind of one on each side. They're a little bit different. Over here on the passenger side, you're simply going to lay a tape line. This is just like the 1-inch blue painter's tape running parallel to this bottom flange here, going straight back. And you're going to lay that tape to the inside of that flange. Once you have that in place, you can see I've already kind of done it here, but you'll make a mark about 2 inches up on this back angled face. And then you'll simply cut out that rectangular portion on both sides of the tape. Now this doesn't have to be too overly precise because you're just making clearance here for about a 3/16 wide gusset piece of material in the bumper. Now for the driver's side portion, this is going to be kind of similar but different. You're just going to lay a straight line, whether it be with tape or a marker, basically straight out following the inside edge of this lower fastener in this air dam section. And then I'm going to cut to the inside of this tape, just removing this portion. With that out of the way, we can get the bumper prepped for installation. Now with your bumper here on the ground or on a workbench, wherever you might have it, you're going to want to take the sensors out of the factory fascia, as well as the harness you removed earlier. These will simply snap into the provided cutouts on the outside wings of the bumper. Then we can run the wire harness out through these gussets and get it plugged into those sensors. Next, you're going to want to install any accessories you're going to be running into the bumper, such as lighting or a winch. Now, after you have all your accessories in, you're ready to put the bumper on the truck. So grab the help of a friend to help you get it up on these studs and get a few of these factory nuts started. With all those nuts started, you can come down to the bottom side and reinstall the factory 12mm bolts on each side. Now, while all this bumper mounting hardware is still loose, we're going to grab our fascia and grill. Don't forget to put your washer sprayer hose back in place, and then you'll get this snapped into the front of the vehicle. Then after you have this grill and fascia assembly all snapped in place, you can go back, check the alignment of your bumper left to right, and then you can tighten up all that bumper mounting hardware. Once you get all that hardware tight, you'll be able to check the fitment between your fascia and the bumper assembly, and then you can go back and mark and make any final tweaks to your cut. Now, one thing you can do at this point, if you do have a bunch of wiring to do behind here for both your winch and your lights, depending on how you're hooking all that up, you can pull this off one last time. That just allows you obviously more access to everything behind there to route your wiring nice and neat and clean. After you do have all that done and you're happy with the way this looks, as well as the bumper alignment and the gap along your cut, you can snap this back in one final time and then reinstall all the grill mounting hardware, as well as get in behind here and reconnect all the wiring harnesses you may have removed earlier for the camera, the sensors, and then go back in and connect that hose connection for your headlight sprayers as well. Once all that's done, you can grab your grill trim and snap that back in place. Now, the last thing you're going to need to do is trim out these inner fenders. I've kind of already marked this one out the way we are going to recommend to do it. So you've already got, on the passenger side at least, these louver cutouts. So here on the inside, you're going to run just below the bottom set of those. As you come across, you're going to be just above the second set. And then out here, you're kind of going to carry that up just below this nut clip. And then on the very inside here, there's one fastener that we're gonna wanna try and retain just behind this body mount. So we just kind of carried that down at a slight angle and then with a nice straight line to keep that material intact. Once you get it all marked out like this, you can come in with either your cutoff wheel or an air saw like I was using earlier and trim all that out. With that out of the way, you can clean up that cut, remove the tape, and then you can jump over here to the inside of the wheel opening where you're going to need to make one more small cut. Now the cut in here is just going to be a small rectangle of material that needs to be removed. You can see I've kind of marked it out there with a Sharpie. That's just going to allow this to tuck in behind the back flange of the bumper. Once you have that cut out, you can tuck this in behind the bumper flange, make sure it's in behind the fascia, and then reinstall this fastener. After that, you're just going to want to go over and do the same thing on the driver's side. Now over there, it's not going to have all these louvered cutouts to give you a guide, which is why we did this side first. So now you kind of know what shape you're looking to follow when you cut over there. And that's going to do it for our 200 series front bumper install. Now if you guys have any questions about this install or any other product here at Victory 4x4, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us, info@victory4x4.com, or give us a call, 269-459-8447.